Spotlight speaker presentation, How Does Our Brain Process Uncertainty, with Tony Dottino of Dottino Consulting, is sponsored by Seacoast Bank and Strombeck. This is the third in our Spotlight Speaker series, so we're very excited about that. So I want to say welcome. My name is Krista Carter. I'm the Vice President of the West Orange Chamber, and I want to thank you for joining us on our phone call today. I would be remiss if I didn't say Happy Earth Day today. I hope everyone takes a moment to step outside and enjoy nature while you can. There is nature in your backyard, even if you just look a little bit. So that's from the tree hugger of the family. So that's my little pitch. Okay. So I want to thank all of our members that were able to join us today. I also want to give a shout out to our community trustees and our supporting trustees. They are the backbone of the West Orange Chamber, and we really do appreciate their support, especially in this time like this. So I think that we've talked about Tony, we've talked about our sponsors. I think it's now my pleasure to introduce the President and CEO of the West Orange Chamber, Miss Dina Duba.
Thank you, Krista. We continue to practice our social distancing, so she's at least 6 feet ahead of me. Tracy Solly is 6 feet to the left of me. So thank you for everyone being on today's Spotlight Speaker presentation, How Does Our Brain Process Uncertainty? I certainly will be listening because I tell everybody lately I have fuzzy brain. There are moments of total clarity and then moments of, what? And not just the usual walking out of a room and forgetting what you were thinking about. It's certainly more intense than that, but I know that Tony's going to help get us through that. So thank you for being part of this series, Tony, and thank you so much again to Seacoast Bank, one of our wonderful sponsors, community member, community trustee. They have just been a wonderful partner for many, many years with us. And they're a regular bank open for business, even until 6 o'clock at night, because we have a couple of accounts there, which I very much appreciate. And thank you to Scott Michael of Strombeck. He's been a great supporter of our chamber. As both organizations, Seacoast and Strombeck, have allowed us to move their sponsorship dollars around that have allowed us to continue to operate and do some of these virtual activities. So thank you so much for all of you for doing that. I just got off of listening to Orange County Mayor Deming's task force. I am proud to say that we do have good representation on the West Side. We have Deb Linden, who has been with us for many years. She actually heads up our leadership group for our students. So thank you to Deb. It is the COVID-19 task force. Chris was not whispering. I don't know what she's doing. She's telling me things. She's my teleprompter over there. But thank you to Deb Linden, who is on that task force. They just concluded their very first meeting. And also thank you to Chuck Whittle of Unicorp. He's another one of our supporting trustees, as well as being on this task force. And he raised a really good question. Out of all the information they heard today, when is business going to be able to open? We know you're all suffering. I get it. I know so many of you have filed for EIDL, have filed for PPP, and you haven't gotten any dollars yet. I hope with this latest round of funding that hopefully will get approved by the House tomorrow and signed by the President as quickly as possible, that some of you will be seeing some relief. But I know that we'll be working closely with our representatives. I actually just got a phone call from Deb Linden, so I'll be speaking with her to see what we can do to make sure that she's armed with all the information she needs to be able to represent West Orange and all businesses, of course, but West Orange specifically. So thank you to both of those members. I don't know what else I was supposed to be saying other than we know you're hurting. We want to help you. This is just one of the things what we want to do for you is continue these virtual activities, because we know it's the way that we can stay connected. So keep an eye on the chamber calendar. We have quite a few things planned, starting with the Celebrating Extraordinary Women virtual event next Thursday. We have several activities planned for you already in the month of May. And we're going to continue virtually until we are able to be at least 10 people in a room together, distanced by 6 feet, distanced by masks. And we will continue to send out surveys to see what you have all been preparing and getting ready for, and making sure that you know what you need to have ready as we are able to open up for regular business. So thank you for being with the chamber. I know I rambled a little bit, but again, I told you I have fuzzy brain. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Krista so that we can get on with listening to Tony and what he's going to tell you to help you uncloud your brains and make sure that you are moving forward and put yourselves in a really good position. So thank you, Tony, for that conversation we had several weeks ago, and thanks for getting to know me a little bit more, and thank you for supporting us. Bye, everybody.
All right, thank you, Stina. We greatly appreciate that. And I also want to say thank you to all the chamber staff. They have been helpful in learning how to do things virtually, and we have flipped on a dime, so we're good to go with that. So without any further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, Tony Dottino. Tony Dottino founded Dottino Consulting Group in 1995, and that group specializes in leadership development and the sustainable transfer of problem-solving skills to all workers. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome Tony Dottino.
Good morning. It is a delight to be here with you. And my goal here today is to actually have you take a look at things you already know and apply them in a different way, where you become a bit more aware of exactly what's going on in this world of uncertainty.
Tony, can you hear me for just 1 second? I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt you, but I want to say one thing I forgot to say. If you have any questions for Tony today, what we're going to do is we're going to keep you on mute, but please put them in the chat window. That chat window is going to be located on your right-hand side. If you don't see it, please move your cursor under the bottom of the screen and you'll see a little bubble pop up. You'll click that and you'll see the chat box open up. And you'll see that Carrie has got some of those questions in there already. So I'm sorry, Tony. I just want to make sure everybody understands where to do that. And now I'm zipping it. Thank you, Tony.
That was an important feedback point, because we do want to, I love to give people with questions. We're going to see where questions are really the source of creativity and finding new solutions. So thank you for stepping back and doing that. I think it's important for our members to really take a look at that and have questions, and let's see if we can get them answered today. But it'll touch on one of the things I'm going to talk about in terms of our uncertainty when we get to the point where we just don't know, and what happens to our brains when that happens. So my goal here is to have you take a look at things you already know, give you a way of being a little bit more aware of them as how it goes about on our day-to-day actions, and then how it impacts daily living. I just want to give you a short add to the introduction I got from Krista, and that is, I worked in IBM for almost 28 years and was fascinated with how do we re-engage employees into the subject of creativity. And I wound up going to a seminar on the human brain and learning in 1989 that more than half of what we knew about our brain would be proven to be wrong by the end of the 90s. And that's where I began to read, study, research, engage in, well, what was the half that was wrong, and what can I learn about it, and how can it make a difference in people's lives? And that's what I've been doing for the last 30 years. And I tell people, if you just pay attention half of the time, there's something you're going to learn in the process. So with that, I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to be coming to you from, based on those 30 years, what have I learned and how do I apply it in my day-to-day life? And this presentation came as a result of a phone call that I had from my daughter, whose her daughter, my granddaughter, was being let go in college. They were being told to close down. And my granddaughter, who was in her junior year of college, started to freak out. And so my daughter calls me and says, "Dad, you've been a great help to her in terms of her high school and her college and talking to her. Can you please talk to her and help her understand what's going on and how you can go through the process, or how she can get through this and not bounce off the walls?" I talked to Stina about that at the time and gave her what my conversation was with my granddaughter. And I am just thrilled to tell you that 1 month later, she is not bouncing off of walls. She is doing some amazing things and is absolutely handling the confinement, handling not going back to college probably as well as I could have ever hoped and dreamt about or expected. So that's what I want to take you through. And so the first thing that I want to share with you is I've done years and years of research and studying the brain. It was fascinating. So this comes out of a Your Brain magazine that was published in 2018. Popular Science had a whole thing about your intelligence and how to touch on it. And so the first thing I want you to realize is that our brain has an infinite amount of thinking capacity. And any new thoughts that we get or any new inputs that we get to that trigger a series of an internal universe and an internal network of thinking. And so I start with a formula of 1 + 1 = infinity. Now, what does 1 plus 1 equal infinity? I've taught all my grandkids the subject of 1 plus 1, and when I'm talking to them, they always say to me, are we talking about a math class or are we talking about Grandpa's brain research? And so the thought of 1 plus 1 is, Grandpa's brain research says, one thought that we already have in our brain, adding one new thought that we can get from any new inputs, whether we hear it on the internet, whether we hear it through a phone call, whether we read about it, whether we hear a news report, radio, any new thoughts trigger the potential of a whole series of new thoughts, which is the source of creativity. The key to that, though, comes from what I call our gig. And our gig is, if we're putting garbage into our brain that has infinite capacity to generate, then we will grow garbage. So we need to be aware of what position is our gig in, because in reverse, in the work I've done over the last 25 years, I have found people that have taken that first position G from garbage into good, into greatness. So we have to be aware of where is our gig going. And as we go through day-to-day news reports, updates from the newspaper, task force committees, information is similar to what Stina has just given you, which way are we taking our gig? Are we taking it into a good in and good will grow? Are we optimistic about what we can achieve and what we're learning and make it greatness in and greatness grows? Or are we taking it into a negative to where garbage in a sense of how we synergize and process, and garbage will grow? So the first awareness I want you to become totally mindful of is, where is your gig? At the beginning of the day, in the middle of the day, and at the end of the day. And that gig is funneled and controlled by the questions or the blanks, I call it the uncertainty, that we have in our world today. So in preparation for this presentation today, I've spent the last week talking to the people in my social network. So I'm on Zoom a lot, I'm on Skypes, I'm on phone, I'm talking with people on a regular basis. And I've been asking them a question, which is, why are you listening to the news? Or what questions do you have that are causing you to have a level of uncertainty to your brain that you would want to be able to get answered? Because what we've learned is that our brain craves completeness when it has blanks that it wants to fill in. So if I can change the word uncertainty to blanks, when we are craving information and we don't have the answers to that information, we generate a level of synergy of thinking that sometimes can be very stressful and angst-provoking and drive us up the wall. So what I've been doing is asking people, what is the information that you would like to know about COVID-19 that is triggering uncertainty in your brain? So I've got a list here I've prepared, so I'm going to just give you, the list got longer. Each time I ask somebody, they have something new, but let me just go to you. So why are you listening to the news? Why are you reading the newspaper? Why are you talking to people? And what are you trying to learn if you go to the internet, to the web? So the first thing that I got from people is, what are they not telling us? So there's a level of mistrust in terms of there's something more that people know that we're not being told. That's a huge level of uncertainty, and it's what I call a big blank in a brain that then starts to generate its own synergy of how it's going to fill in that blank. How long is this going to continue? When do we ever get back to normal? Was the second one. So how long is this going to go? As Stina just put on there, I mean, I think she just dropped it right into her opening. How long is this going? When are we going to get what? Back to normal, and when we can reopen. And so everybody, my grandkids, I've got 6 different grandkids that we've been talking to, and all of them wondering, how long is this going to go on? It's like the biggest question that people have got in terms of the level of, is there a date to this? Now, we live in Florida. We get prepared for a hurricane, and we get all kinds of hurricane preparedness. We get a beginning, we watch the weather, the hurricane comes, we put a plan together, and we know pretty much what our target dates are and what we can do to mobilize. In this particular case, we don't have answers to those questions. How long is this going to go on? Where is it coming from? What's happening in the world? Who has it? Who doesn't? Who's been tested? Who hasn't been? And so the data changes. So the third thing is the data keeps changing. And so when you look at when our initial national forecasts were, and even our own local forecast, the dates and the amount of people with it, people that may be at risk for dying, those numbers have been changing since the end of March. And they even changed from when we thought we were going to hit our peak. Well, that creates a lot of angst and a lot of uncertainty in people that they want to be able to fill in, but nobody knows exactly how to fill that in. Another one that's showing up over the last week from people that I've talked with, well, what are the long-term impacts to this? If someone has it, does it impact their heart? Does it impact their lungs? What does it do to their long-term health? Are there things to the liver or things to their I mean, what else is going on after someone gets this? So not only do we think of short-term, but we're also thinking of what are the longer-term impacts to it. Should we, another one, should we wear a mask? Who should be tested? Who shouldn't be tested? Should I wear a mask when I go outside? So again, we heard Stina talking about, we're going to bring people together. We're going to all have a mask with our social distancing. Should we wear a mask? What kinds of masks should we wear? Our personal clothing items that we put around our face, are those good? And so we just generate. When am I going to get back to my normal routines? When people talk about when do I get back to normal? And I look at them, I say, I don't know that there's a normal coming out of this. And that's a hard thing for people to accept sometimes when they're used to routines and when they get up and when they get their cup of coffee and they get in the car or they go to work or they go to school. And now this is just a major disruptor of normal habits of routines. And if you studied and worked with people that were confronted with changes, not an easy task. And this is being thrown at us as a major change initiative that we really don't have an option whether we want to play or not. What about my stocks? What about my investments? What's going to happen to my stock portfolio, my investment portfolio? Am I going to have money when this is all done? Am I going to have a job? Where am I going to get toilet paper when I go to Publix? You know, where am I getting my food from? Now I'm hearing that some major food plants closing down because of their employees with it. Well, we're going to now have food shortages. Are we going to find when we go to the grocery store, we're not going to get some of the things that we eat in our regular diets and things of that sort. So people worry about two of the most vital things. My finances, can I pay my rent? Will I have a job? How am I going to pay my mortgage? How am I going to eat? How am I going to survive? And so these are what I call all of the blanks that are being generated inside of the COVID-19 that create a high level of uncertainty for a brain that causes us to want to do one of two things. We either crave so much information that we just want to listen to the news all day long, or we want to get the latest update minute by minute. And the problem with that is this is not a minute by minute deal. So people are like, well, when are we going to find a vaccine? When will we find the right meds? I was listening to news last night and I was just, it's my trigger. I heard somebody say that the medications that they thought that they do for lupus and for malaria may not be the best thing for people, that may be harming them and doing more damage than good. And so I'm like, oh my goodness, I had heard so many other reports that said this might be a hope, and now to find that that hope got blasted up. It's like, oh my goodness, that kind of threw my night off a little bit. And I had to ground myself into some music that I go listen to just get back on planet Earth. So the question that comes out of all this uncertainty, the second part of that is, does it so overwhelm us? Does it so get us to the point where it begins to impact our physical and emotional well-being? So as I got through these things with my granddaughter, I started asking her, so what are some of the blanks that you've got? And she started telling me, am I going to get back to school? Am I going to see my friends? I have a photography class that I'm supposed to be outside and outdoors, not people related, but outdoors taking pictures of my media class. How am I going to go out of the house and take pictures of nature and of things that I'm supposed to be doing with other buildings and trees and plants if I can't go out of the house? And she's worried about her photography class. And so I asked her a question, what are you making all this mean? So as we look at all these blanks that we have, what's our interpretation in these blanks, and how are we making them mean whatever they mean? Now, so the questions become a driver of a synergy of thought that now moves into what are the physical manifestations of this thinking, of this craving of information doing to our physiology. So the next thing I started to ask her in the call we had was, okay, so what are you feeling? Are you feeling a difference? And she said, well, I'm getting a headache. Okay, got it. Okay, well, I'm getting a stomach ache. So I got it. Okay, so let's start thinking about what your physiology is in this thing. And let's see if that physiology is being driven by your emotions and how you're responding. And so I took her back and pulled out a Science News article magazine from back in 2015 that I've used in much of my work that I do with hospital nurses and doctors, et cetera. And it was the mess that is stress. So the article was all about the mess that is stress. And in it, it talked about we lose control, we have social isolation, we may have loneliness, we may have a not ability to finish whatever we're doing or working on. We may have PTSD. I mean, it's just high blood pressure, high asthma, heart disease. I mean, it just goes on and on. There's a whole column here of the impacts that we have from the physiology and the emotions, from how we're responding to what we're getting in the news or the lack thereof, and not being able to crave the completeness. And in my business consulting, one of the things I have found that drives people crazy the most, it comes out of, again, two branches, two sides, is when people give an answer of, I don't know the answer to that. I can't tell you how many meetings I've been in where people in those meetings are very afraid to tell an executive, boss, I don't know the answer to that. Because they think they're supposed to know the answer to everything. And so that comes from two pieces. One is the acceptance of there may be times when you don't know the answer to something. And it's okay to tell the boss, I don't know the answer to that, but I'll get back to you. I'll go find it and return. Now, I'll tell you what drives bosses crazy is when somebody makes that commitment and they don't come back with the answer. That'll drive an executive up the wall. They told me they'd get back to me. They made a commitment to getting that answer. I wanted that information. I craved that completeness. The blanks of uncertainty never got filled, and now they haven't made a commitment. And that's one way to get on the bad list. The second thing is I hear people respond to questions in that dialogue, and I sometimes see this in the work I've done in ER departments, emergency room departments or emergency departments, where you hear a doctor say, I believe, or I think, and they're believing and thinking about a clinical diagnosis of care or responses they're going to make. When the answer people want to hear is, I know what the clinical outcome is. I know what the results are showing. So patients go through MRIs, they go scans, they go through blood tests, and patients are craving that level of uncertainty. They want to get it filled. They want the results. And what I have found is when we don't know something and we get told the answer, you know what? We just don't know the answer to that. And so how many doctors and scientists and governmental governors and health officials in different states, even here in our own, in Orange County, we listen to our mayor and our health people, and they come to the point of, we don't know the answer to that. And what does that do to us? Drives us crazy. What do you mean we don't know the answer to that? We're supposed to know all these answers. And the answer to this is we don't know. So when I see people go back to 1917 in the history books to say, and this is the last time we hit this wall, and we're now hitting it, and they call it the once in 100, then all I want to know is who was alive in 1917, and let me go ask them what that experience was, and maybe they were 1 or 2 years old, and hopefully they remember it. And it's kind of ludicrous. It's absolutely something we haven't come to accept, is there are a lot of questions and blanks of uncertainty in this scenario of COVID-19 that we just don't have the answers to. And I remember doing a Zoom with a college class on leadership. And I asked one of the students, would you like to be a leader today? And He looked back on the internet response and he said, "Are you crazy?" He said, "I wouldn't want to have the responsibility, or I wouldn't want to be accountable for coming up with the answers for what we're supposed to be doing during these times." And he then shares with me, he said, "I'm watching my dad in his business bounce off the walls, and I never want to go through what I'm watching him go through now. So therefore, let me be a worker and not a leader." When we don't know the answer to something, it drives us crazy. And in this case, it's driving people crazy. And what I was predicting a month ago, with all of the blanks that are coming out of this, and what I was seeing in my grandkids, and I was seeing with business associates, and I was seeing the level of stress that people were going under in terms of business owners and what was happening. My bet was some of the damage and the consequences that we're having from shutting down is going to offset some of the benefits we're getting from keeping people confined. And leaders have got to be able to balance in their own minds what the risk is versus the rewards. If the risk is I don't get to live anymore, then it doesn't matter what the rewards are. So how do you balance that in terms of not having a clear assessment of experience, knowledge, information that allows you to get through this and get to the other side of it? And so what I've been coaching the grandkids and business associates, students that I've been addressing to, I do a Facebook Live on the USA Memory Championship every 5 days a week. And I've offered people, hey, give me a call, send me an email. And so I get emails from people and they're looking for some help. And I say, I'll give you some help. Let me see if I can make a difference. But the biggest thing people are asking is, how am I going to get through this? Can I? And I just encourage them to do whatever it takes to live and get to the other side of this. And we'll figure it out when we get there. Why can we figure it out? Because we have an infinite amount of creativity in our own thinking capacities if we stay mindful and focused on the stresses that lead then to anxiety. So my grandkids, they're going from anxiety because they keep asking, when is this going to end? When will this be over and I can go back to normal? So we go from stress, which is the immediate emotional response to it and the physiology that it causes, to anxiety, which is saying, there's no end in this thing. It's going to persist. So therefore, at the end of a stress attack, you kind of let it go and it gets past until you get a trigger again that re-ups it. Or you create yourself a level of anxiety where you're looking at this and say, when is the end of this ever going to come? And so I'm sitting a couple of days ago and I'm listening to a news report. And I'm obviously, you can tell by looking at me, I'm in the over 60 category. And what they're suggesting is we're going to be in this phase 3 or 4. We're going to be in the downstream. And I'm sitting there thinking, my goodness, I'm here confined for months. And I've already been here for a bit. And now I'm saying I have to adjust my mental synergy to a level of uncertainty to when do I get to the other side of this? And so we look at stress. So now we look at the stress and I say, do we understand our emotional physical response? And then do we really objectively comprehend the price we're going to pay for it if we decide to lock in and stay there and move from stress to anxiety that may even go to depression and panic? And then the triggers come and we go right back. So I've learned in my own work, listening to what news do I watch? What am I paying attention to? What are my triggers that set me off? And then I come back to the science of smart. I just dropped the magazine. I'm going to pick up the science of smart. And in the science of smart, they have something in here that says, do people understand the price we're paying if we don't become aware of and mindful in stopping the synergy of garbage growing? And here it says, chronic stress via the cortisol we have can actually shrink the hippocampus. Meaning if we continue to stay in the levels we're at, we're going to shrink our hippocampus. Now people say, well, what the heck is the hippocampus? The hippocampus, through the USA Memory Championship work that I've done for 22 years and working with MIT and Princeton and Columbia neuroscience colleges, the hippocampus is where we store all of our memories and our intellectual learning and intellectual capacities to move on and remember and create. So now we have this chronic stress that we're in. We've got all these questions that we're being overloaded with. And now we come along and we want to shrink our hippocampus. So I asked my granddaughter, I said, Patricia, now that we understand what you're making this stuff mean in terms of how you're interpreting all these blanks that you're asking questions about, we're understanding your physical, emotional responses to it. Do you really want to pay the price to staying locked in that position? Or do you want to use your brain to find other options? Do we want to find alternative things that we can do that can move us from position and take us somewhere else? And to my thankfulness, it made a difference in her thinking, and she started thinking of things that she could do. So she's doing them. And the thing that's wonderful is she's getting her photography work done. Her mom takes her in the car, brings her out somewhere. She stays in the car, opens a window, takes her pictures, and she's getting her photography class done. She's learned how to socially network, which we're all learning, how to socially network through Zooms and WebExes and things of this sort, how to stay connected to her friends, and especially to the ones that were going to be graduating that she was part of the media club with. So she's learning how to stay connected on a social level. So we're learning to do things in a world today that has so much uncertainty, but if we stay focused on what are our options and what can we do as alternatives, then we've got something we can grab onto that can make a difference. So the next thing I thought about as I talked to her and as I've been talking with other people, I put together a list. So I got another list here for you. Or what are some of the options from the science that again, for me, this stuff just comes in, it integrates, and I can listen to what people are saying and say, here's some suggestions I may make based on where you're at. And I love the emails I get back in return when people tell me what a difference it's made. So I got one yesterday from a woman that said, my God, Tony, I can't thank you enough and thank you enough. It has made such a difference. I've reached out through the internet and I now have 18,000 people that are communicating with me from across the world. And I owe it to the coaching and the counseling you gave to me. So we moved it from what I call lockdown to let's create and let's figure it out. And we'll come back to that in a minute. But I want people to realize what's the price you're paying with this physical, emotional stress that moves you through the stages of stress, anxiety, depression. I'm hoping I'm wrong on my prediction of suicides. I'm hoping I'm wrong in terms of what we've seen here in Florida with college kids having depression and going for counseling when they're on campus. And I'm hoping I'm wrong as I continue to read about kids at home bouncing off the walls through online training. So here are some of the things that I'm recommending that they can do. First of all, let's accept ambiguity right now. So I'm going to give you 5 things I want you to focus on. So the first thing I want you to realize is I've not been through this, and I'm a senior. I've never seen anything like it. I sure wonder why anybody would want to be a governor or the president of the United States at this point, because there's no history book that they can look at and say, here's what history will tell us, and here are adjustments and things we can make. They're experiencing this for the first time. And if there's one thing I've learned in my consulting work, I do a creativity survey with people, and I ask them to scale themselves on, do you tolerate ambiguity? Meaning, do I tolerate being in the gray zone and not having a clear-cut answer versus it's got to be black or white so I can figure out what I need to do? And what I have found in those researches over the years is the majority of people do not like ambiguity. They want answers. They want to fill in the blanks. They want to fill in uncertainty. What I'm suggesting to you today is recognize that we collectively are all experiencing this for the first time. So we're going to find things out as we go along and try to leave the blanks to a minimum that are generating your stress and anxiety. Accept that fact that people don't know the answers. That's part of our blanks. There are some things we just don't know, and there are other things that we know today and we change tomorrow. So we're going to wait till that solidifies itself and it gives us a stronger foundation of trust, confidence, and credibility of the people we're listening to. Which brings me to point number 2. I am at the point now with my family members where I'm telling them to limit the news and the information they're putting into their heads about COVID-19. Because we are reaching the point where there's so much that we're craving and so much that we're feeling, we don't know what to believe, we don't know what to trust. It changes every other day. And so it washes down, it dampens our level of hope that there's an end of a tunnel somewhere coming. So based on the news reports and the information you've got, limit your time. And limit your time to, do you want national news or do you want local news? Now, I'm here in Windermere, Florida. I want to know what's going on in Orange County. So I look every morning at our numbers. I do a morning peak. I do a morning channel 13 Spectrum. And that's it. I don't want to know anything more. My other half, and the other point, she's doing a lot of work at IBM up in Armonk, New York. So she wants to know what the national news is. So she wants to know what's going on in New York. And occasionally I'll watch the reports coming out of New York, and you want to be depressed, watch a news conference that comes out of New York. I have a colleague of mine who lives a few blocks from the hospital that's got the 10 trailers of bodies. You want to talk about stress and anxiety and where that's at. So the second thing I want to do is limit your news and your time. And what are your triggers? Number 3, note your gig. Where is your gig going? And do you want to let it take you to stress and anxiety, or let's go, we have an infinite amount of creativity. It's infinite. And we keep that to understanding what are our skills, what are my clients, who are my customers, what can I do with my brain to figure out how to adapt? So my team is looking at, so how are we going to hold the next USA Memory Championship online? How are we going to get our online maximum memory class out to people? How are we going to get some of the things that we're doing right now through the internet and adapt and create as we're going along? Number 4, find an hour of quiet time to yourself. And what this means is you got to like the people that you're living with. Now, what do I mean by that? There are times in talking to the grandkids that they basically have said, I don't like mom or I don't like dad because they're a pain. Well, what do you mean they're a pain? Well, I go to my room or I go here, and they come in and ask me if I've done this, or did I get my homework done, or did I get this done? And they're just a pain when I don't want to do anything. Now, the problem with that is kids today want to do texting. They want to do more online. I'm finding out from students, they're not doing their assignments. So talking to assignments, I hear professors, I hear teachers talk about kids are not accountable for the work that I'm assigning them and therefore are not always doing it. I don't know if that's a national epidemic or it's a local one, but it's a responsibility of finding everybody, parents and adults, grandma, grandpas, they all need to have some quiet time to themselves. So is there a place in the house, in an apartment, in a condo, a townhouse, where you can go find your own space for an hour a day and just listen to your own music? Or sometimes I just go out in the backyard, as we were talking earlier. Nature is a great healer and mindful way of dealing with stresses and things of uncertainty. So I go out in the back and I put a chair out in the back and I look at the pond and I look for fish jumping out of the water. I see a gator there every once in a while. I look at the trees blowing in the wind, and I have found myself in the past week saying, I want to move my hour of quiet time. I now want 2 hours of quiet time. So I'm finding myself taking myself out of the crazy and going to find myself to just 1 hour, go sit at the pond and look for the fish, look for the gator. And another hour, I sit on the front porch and we socialize with our neighbors across the driveway. So they sit in there. So on the left and the right, we channel out neighbors and we go 1 hour to the left, 1 hour to the right, and we socialize with people. And then we'll get a glass of wine some days, a glass of soda, and we'll have a cocktail on the internet. Now, is that the best? Is sitting down next to them? Heck no. But is it a better substitute than just flipping out and not figuring out how to maintain social interaction, because this is the one I dropped. Loneliness kills. If you look at the research on loneliness, it tells you here, people that are so deeply not connected are socially excluded. It hurts like an actual wound. So now, what's my sixth and final point? So find your quiet time in your space. And your last, number 5, excuse me. Know when to ask for help. This is one of the things I'm encouraging parents, and every parent I talk to. Know how to ask your kids when they may need help. I've got one of the 2, actually, of the 6 grandkids that don't know how to ask for help. That worries me more than anything, because they just keep it locked in. They keep it to themselves. And what I know is if you keep stuff into yourself, you're harming your whole person as well as your brain. So here comes a Psychology Today magazine from April of 2018. 10 things you can do to get support and know how to keep social interaction. So again, what I love in terms of what the chamber is doing is they're keeping the members socially interactive. And I'm not sure if Stina and team are just doing that because they want to maintain a level of social interaction with people. But what they may or may not realize is how incredibly beneficial that is to all of the members to keep them engaged to a team of people in some sort, and how valuable that is to their brain health and to the physiology of their bodies. So my last tip with you then is know when to ask for help. And I have had some amazing people when I do my Facebook live broadcast come back to me and actually take me up on the offer for help. Because in my broadcast, I said, if you want help, send me an email. Where one of my favorite ones was a group of mothers on the West Coast that we did a Zoom session with that were all worried about themselves and their families. And it was an hour and a half long. And the feedback I've gotten from that makes a difference. So what's the side? Know when to ask for help that you need. Number 2, know when to ask someone else for help that they may need. There's your social support network that is extremely vital to all of us. I'm ready for questions right now, Krista. If we've got some questions that I can use this time, I wanted to make sure I covered points. So let me just quickly review. Ambiguity, accept it. Limit your information and news. Note your gig and be more creative about it. Find time for yourself in the space, and know when to ask for help and when to offer help. Those are your 5 takeaways from today's session, that if you just become more aware of those 5 things, I'm finding through the last 6 weeks, it is making a difference in people's ability to deal with what's going on.
Thank you so much, Tony. Carrie and Kelly, do you see any questions at this time in the chat box? Because I can't see it because I don't have my glasses on.
I do not have any questions at this time, but if anyone would like to ask, please feel free to type in or raise your hand, and we'll be glad to call on you or read your question.
Tony, thank you so much for your presentation. I find my peace in nature for sure. That's really where I go to when I've had a bad day, or just even before the pandemic. That's where I go. I just go and I watch my bird feeder.
Krista, you know what the good part is, and the science is revealing this, and I did a broadcast on this, is even looking at pictures. So if you're not in the, we're fortunate, and we still have nature in our yards and things. But if you're in an apartment, a picture of nature, trees, streams, mountains, fabulously helpful to your brain's mindfulness and ability to adapt and recover.
I don't know if you ever watch the CBS Sunday morning show, but every Sunday they do a minute clip of nature, and they always end their shows that way. No matter what news you've heard, you get that bring down for peace.
Our memory championship has been featured on that song a couple of times, so I'm a little biased about that. I love it. I used to love Charles Osgood, but I get it. I love it, and I do watch it every week. And if I'm not watching it, I'm recording it and watching it during the week. I enjoy the show very much.
Yes, and they say the most popular segment is that nature piece at the end.
I can get it, and boy, it does. And then you hear the birds chirping or the sounds of nature, and it's great.
Yeah, definitely. So, Carrie, I don't think I see any more up there. Do you?
I do not have any questions at this time. I do have some wonderful comments about how helpful Tony's session was, but I don't see any questions at this moment.
Can I throw something out to the audience then? If they're still listening, they can respond. What was one or two of the things that I've shared with you that you might find the most helpful in your life? So if I can get a couple of people, I'm always interested in getting feedback from people as I'm teaching these, at least these 5 elements that I'm finding or working. Can I get some of the members to give some feedback on what were 1 or 2 of the points that I've made that you would find most helpful to yourself? I would appreciate that feedback.
So I do see one that popped up that said the gray thinking. I think very black and white. You help me feel not alone.
Oh my goodness. Thomas Edison understood in his work. Now, Thomas Edison's got the greatest innovator of all times. And he understood if he threw his engineers and his workers into the gray zone, it would cause them to have to create ways of dealing with the challenges he would throw at them. But what he also learned is a lot of people don't want to be in the gray zone. So one of the things that he focused on with his employees is how did they handle questions and or things that he would throw at them and not freak out about them. Now, I've had to deal with that. I used to be, you know what, it has to be black or white. But in the work that I've done now over the years, I've come to realize that being in the gray zone, if you can hang in it long enough and not drive yourself crazy, is very often the source of creativity. So when you go back and study creativity and you look at what we get in terms of our brains, when we're in gray and we're struggling to stay with the brain and get out of it, we come up with some of the best solutions. So here's my recommendation. All of us have a time of the day when we get into the zone where we're most creative. So if you can find your time, like mine's 6 o'clock in the morning. I was up at 6 this morning and I was going through this presentation in my head and what I wanted to make sure I covered. My other half is 9 p.m. at night. Can you understand where that creates a little head banging? Like at 9 o'clock, she wants to talk, and at 9 o'clock, I'm done. I want to talk at 6 o'clock, and she's like, let me sleep. So each of you find your time of the day and hang in the gray at least for 24 hours and let your brain go through a cycle of sleep and morning or evening where you're best in the zone. And I have found if you can just hang sometimes for 24, sometimes I tell people 48 hours, your brain will figure it out for you. Other comments?
Tony, we do have a question, please. Right here we have from Martha Santoni. What would you recommend would be the minimum of time to yourself if you find it difficult to find an entire hour in the day?
So the first thing I tell people if they're that crazy and the family and the kids and the spouse and the errands and things is, can you at least find a time of the day where everybody else is at rest? So you may have to adjust your cycle. So like, again, some of the grandkids, right, they're up, one of them's up till 2 a.m. in the morning, right? It's like, what, 2 a.m. in the morning? And she's going to sleep until midday. So I tell her mother, I tell you what, when you look, don't wait till she wakes up at 12 o'clock. And that's what she waits until she wakes up and she says, oh, now that she's woken up, good morning, let me make you something to eat. And now I'll go find my quiet time. And I say, you know what? No, find your quiet time between when you get up in the morning and lunchtime. And she says, yeah, but then I'm doing my work for school between 9 and 12. I said, well, find 15 minutes and just go sit outside and go stare at the trees. But you're going to have to adapt unless you're going to change everyone else's sleep habits and behaviors and what they're doing. You're going to have to adapt at least to find that time where you can get at least little bits. And you know what you find is once you start to train yourself in that cycle, you'll find maybe a second spot and maybe a third spot where you can get 15 minutes. And getting 15 minutes is not bad. It'll be just as much good for you as trying to grab 1 hour in isolation.
All right. Carrie, we got any more questions in there?
We do not have any other questions at this time, but we do have a lot of really nice comments for Tony in his presentation. You've clearly helped a lot of people today, Tony. Thank you. And
people, my other half tells me I'm crazy for doing this. If you want to get personal and you want to get on a one-on-one, it's adottino@aol.com. It's adottino@aol.com. I use that as my personal one versus my Dottino consulting one. So I can get personal with people. If there's any further help that I can offer, I want to make a difference. What's keeping me going right now is knowing I can make a difference in people's lives. And that is helping me personally, being a bit selfish. It's helping me get through the COVID-19 when I know I can still reach people in some fashion and help make a difference in their lives. So if anybody wants to be able to do that, that's one. The other thing is, if you're a Facebook person, go to Facebook USA Memory Championship and go to videos or just tune in. I do 5 days a week on Facebook Live on different things I'm reading, studying, tips that I'm picking up from people I'm talking to, and you can at least stay connected in that fashion if it helps.
Thank you so much, Tony. And I know for a fact that he means it. He will help you. Even when we were organizing this phone call, he was helping Carrie and I with our teenage daughters, or preteen daughters, I should say. But
what are they making it mean? For sure. So what, and they're willing to pay the price, and do they recognize their own, God, if you just stay on, what are they making it mean? And what information can, so I was coaching somebody yesterday. It's like, just ask the kids at the dinner table, what questions are they worried about or thinking about that you can help them answer, fill in uncertainty as best as you can.
Well, thank you so much, Tony. We really do appreciate it. I want to thank our sponsors again, Seacoast Bank and Strombeck. I want to remind everybody that if you go to wochamber.com, you can see all of our upcoming events. Stina spoke about that earlier. April 30th is our Celebrating Extraordinary Women. May 7th is our next virtual lead and feed. Also on wochamber.com, you can also find all your business resources for the COVID-19 situation. We have all kinds of information there that you can go through and find about loans or what you need federally or locally. So if you need anything, please don't hesitate to contact the West Orange Chamber. I want to thank Carrie and Kelly for making everything go smoothly today. Thank you very much. And we will be sending a follow-up email to all of our participants as well. So thank you very much. And I hope everybody has a great day. And remember, happy Earth Day.
Thank you.
Bye.